This will be the last type of sentence structure that we'll be studying. So before we learn about it, I would like to review the three other types of sentences that we have. We learned about simple sentences, which just have one clause, and that clause is independent, which means it can stand by itself. And my two examples that I gave you is she is strong and they built the house. Both of those have one independent clause. You need nothing else added to the sentence in order for it to make sense or to be complete. The next type we learned about was compound. And a compound sentence is two independent clauses and they are joined correctly, and that means either by a semicolon or a comma with a fanboy, also known as a coordinating conjunction. The first example is joined. The two sentences are joined by a comma and the coordinating conjunction and the second set of independent clauses are joined together by a semicolon. And the last type of sentence that we learned about is a complex sentence. And a complex sentence has one independent clause and it has to have at least one dependent clause. So you have a clause that can stand by itself, and then you have another clause that typically begins with a subordinating conjunction. And I have highlighted the dependent clauses red in the example. So the first example, whenever it rains, it pours. Whenever it rains begins with a subordinating conjunction, and if we were to make that into a sentence, which means put a period after rains, it would not make sense. It would not be a complete thought. So we know that's a dependent clause. In the second example, we couldn't go because we didn't follow the rules. Again, if we just took out because we didn't follow the rules and made that into just a sentence, it would not be a complete thought. The last type we're going to learn about are compound complex sentences. And a compound complex sentence is a sentence that contains two or more independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. Now, if you'll notice, I have changed the color of the font to help you see which parts are independent and which parts are dependent. Independent clauses will be in purple, whereas the dependent clauses will be in the brownish orange color. The first example says, while the storm raged outside, Bert completed his homework and Elizabeth called her mother. So while is a subordinating conjunction, and so that indicates to us that would be a dependent clause, and Bert completed his homework, comma, and Elizabeth called her mother. That's the compound part, right? We know that compound sentences are joined together by a comma and a fanboy or a semicolon. In these types of sentences, compound complex sentences, they will most likely be joined together with a comma and a fanboy. And then you can look at the second and third examples and see that they are both made up of two independent clauses and one dependent clause. For your practice, you need to write the sentences on these. There are only 5. And what you'll need to do is you'll need to label the independent clauses with an IC written above it, and then write a DC above the dependent clause.